Welcome to R2-3D, my name is Alan, and in this week's video I'll be tackling one of my all-time favourite video game characters, namely the Doomslayer, the Doom Dude, the Doommeister himself, from Doom. This particular Doomslayer figure is actually from the Patreon of Hell Creator. I highly recommend you check him out. I'll leave a link in the description below. Today's video is actually my first collaboration. I was approached by the good folks at Funcrecol and they asked me if I'd be interested in testing out some of their resin products. I wasn't paid for this or told to say anything, and they never asked me to approve anything in this video, so you're going to get my honest opinion. I tested two resins, a tough grey and a standard red wax, printed all the parts on my Elegoo Saturn 8K, and I have to say they turned out beautifully once I got the resins dialed in. I also noticed that there was very little odour from these resins. I decided early on that I wanted to include lots of LED lights, so I drilled out holes in the shield with a hand drill. The wires would run from here through the arm and into the body. I used Funcrecol's UV Putty to fix the seams in the base. It was pretty easy to apply, and then I used a silicone sculpting brush to smooth it out into the base and then harden it with a UV pen. The putty was a nice halfway between modelling clay and liquid resin, and I think I'll use that again. Once I primed the parts with Vallejo black primer, I began painting the base with Army Painter Field Grey. I painted several parts a couple of times as I was experimenting with tones and colour until it felt it was right. At this stage I wasn't concerned about overspray, as I'll be painting the parts that go over with a paintbrush later on. As you can see from this base, I originally painted it with a dark grey, but I later changed that to a Pro Acryl black brown to give it a bit more of a colour change from all the grey on it. This was then given a dry brush to add detail for the damage and the edge wear. I used lighter grey tones dry brushed on top to emphasise wear and detail and to add points of interest. The demon's fur on the base was painted primer black and then given brown highlights with Pro Acryl transparent brown. This was applied from above to simulate the light hitting it. I then hit it with Vallejo burnt umber from the same direction to add to the colour. I used a black wash from a low angle to add to the shadowing area of the fur. And for a final pass I used Army Paint's Monster Brown to add to the lightest tone of the fur model with a dry brush application. The demon's head was given a zenithal highlight with Vallejo white in preparation for painting yellow and orange and red on top, all of which would have been difficult to paint over black. I hollowed out the model in lychee slicer and cut out 5mm holes for the eyes so that I could insert LEDs from the inside. These will be added later after painting is done. I gave the horns a layer of Vallejo dwarf skin as to act as an undercoat for the orange and also to provide some different colour to go with the orange. Next was a pass with Army Painter Mythical Orange. This will be blended in with the yellow to give variations of colour over the horns. I freehand airbrushed Vallejo Bloody Red over the skull part and kept it fairly loose over where the two met. The jawlines were painted with a combination of Pro Acryl black, brown and Vallejo chainmail silver. I splattered Army Paint's Monster Brown from a toothbrush to simulate dirt and grime, and then did a grime pass of Pro Acryl transparent brown, heavily watered down with water over the whole thing, and then scrubbed it with a damp paper towel. I gave the demon's head a second dark wash with Vallejo black heavily diluted so that it would sit in all the recesses, and then went over it again with a damp paper towel. For the teeth of the demon, I used a combination of Vallejo Chainmail Silver and Scale 75's Ink Intensity White, and used Tamiya X27 Clear Red to give the inside of the mouth a nice wet glossy red finish. I used the same paint to add the blood splatter detail to the model and then sprayed the skull with satin varnish to protect the paintwork and add a little shine to the model. For For the Doomslayer's fur coat, the coat was painted with primer black and then given a brown tint with Pro Acryl transparent brown sprayed from a high angle so that it only appears on the fur from the direction that the light would hit it. For the demon's eyes, I used an orange LED inside each eye hole and then painted a circle around the LED with the LED lit so I could see how it would look when they were working. This gave the eyes a more sinister look and added to their effect. I then painted clear red from Tamiya to alter the colour of the eye and to give it a wet look. I painted the boots in a couple of coats with a mix of Vallejo red leather and sand primer and then left them to dry. The wooden inserts in the shield were then painted with the same Vallejo red leather. I painted the silver areas of the shield with chainmail silver. This would be the basis for the colour for the chainsaw teeth and the metal areas of the shield. I used the same colour to paint the Slayer's right forearm and shotgun as its base colour. The arm was also hollowed out in lychee slicer and several holes were added to allow for the LEDs to shine through from the inside that would be added in later. For the green armour areas of his outfit, I first brush painted a lighter green colour but decided it needed darkening down a bit, so I went over it again with a combination of pale green and US dark green, both by Vallejo. This colour was applied to the rest of the green areas of the armour as well. I oversprayed the shield green with the same combination later to get a smoother finish. To give the armour more variation, I used a lighter shade Vallejo Dead Flesh from a high angle to all the armour parts to simulate sun-faded paint, and then did a dark pass in all the shadow areas from low angles with Vallejo Black Green. Here you can see I'm spraying into all the dark recesses and shadow areas with Vallejo Black Green. This is to try and emphasise the curvature of the armour. For the detailing on the shield, I painted a base coat of Vallejo white that will go under all the bright red painted script. This helps to give the red a boost and make it so much brighter than if I had just painted it on top of the green. The red paint was a combination of Vallejo's fluorescent red and bloody red. To paint all the red areas, I'm just actually using an edge painting technique so that I don't end up painting the red onto the green parts. For the metal parts of the front half of the shield, I painted it with a mix of Vallejo steel and chainmail silver. I painted the damage marks with a fine paintbrush that I bought off Amazon. This is actually a really nice acrylic nail brush, and I'll leave a link in the description below where you can find them. I find it really great for painting really fine detailing. I painted the silver parts on the armour with chainmail silver and edge painted all the line work on the helmet, chest and shoulder areas. For the lower abdomen armour, I painted it with Vallejo gunmetal silver to give a nice differential between that and the silver on the armour. The upper arm leather areas I painted with a base of Vallejo red leather. This will get a dark wash over it later to tone it down a bit and give it an aged look. Here you can see my setup for the inside of the shield with the LEDs. I ran them in parallel and ran a simple 2-wire setup to inside the body where it meets a mating connector. I then ran wires down the body and through the leg and into the base where it meets a switch and the power supply. I added weathering on the shield with a damp sponge in 2 green tones, one being Vallejo US dark green and the other a light tone of pale green. I finished off the shield by flicking Tamiya X27 clear red to add to the blood detailing over it. I didn't want to overpower the paintwork, so I just added the bits here and there for effect. For the leather parts around his waist, I again used Vallejo's red leather, and as before with the shoulder areas, this will get a dark wash applied to it and a sponge treatment after it to age it. I inserted a 5mm red LED into the chest cavity and glued it in place. I painted the LED and its surrounding area with Tamiya Clear Red X27. For the leather parts of the armour, I washed them with a diluted layer of Pro Acryl transparent brown and dabbed it off with a damp sponge. I did this in order to get a suitable weathering effect on the leather. For the armour on his legs, I gave it a base coat of chainmail silver and later darkened that down with some panel line black with a dab of a sponge. This paint was also applied to the chainmail itself and the detail parts like the chain and the belt buckle. I overpainted the panel line black to fill in the shadowy areas of it and then dry brushed that with a steel to bring out the highlights and also to the armour edges. You can see here I'm just running the panel line brush over the chainmail. It leaves the black in the recesses of the chainmail and produces the desired effect. I edge painted the metal parts of the boots with Vallejo steel and painted the rivets, spikes and edges with this paint. It's quite a lot to paint on the boots, but if you take your time it ends up looking really nice. I then painted the stitches on the leather parts with chainmail silver. I painted the detailing and wear and tear on the armour and torso with Vallejo steel, and for the wear parts I used an almost dry brush and then rubbed it with the brush to produce a burnished effect. This just makes it look like he's had battle damage on his armour and rubbed the paint off. For the back face of the shield, I painted one of the areas with a mix of red leather and hull red. This will get a weathering pass later to age the leather. I applied a panel line wash of black over the entire right forearm and shotgun and dabbed it with a sponge to weather it and to get the shadowy areas to help enhance the silver detailing. I painted the leather straps under the armour with a mix of red leather and Pro Acryl transparent brown. I decided to darken down the leg armour and felt it was too bright with the initial colour, so I ran over it with a panel line black and dabbed it with a sponge to weather it. I gave the shotgun shells on his belt a quick dab with Deco Colour Gold, which always leaves a really nice finish. I then added weathering and damage to the armour with a dry brush of chainmail silver. This was then rubbed over the green paint of the armour to produce the desired effect I was going for. My plan for the helmet visor was to put a base colour of Vallejo gloss black and then apply a thin layer of Green Stuff's clear resin to make it look like plastic visor or glass. To add grime and wear to the green armour, I used a wash of Pro Acryl Black Brown that was heavily diluted with a 50-50 mix of water. This helps the paint sink into the recesses and also helps reduce the marks when it's dabbed with a damp paper towel. I applied the black brown wash in a few layers. You can be quite heavy handed with the paint at this stage as it lifts off quite easily with a damp sponge or a damp paper towel. I applied green stuff clear resin to the visor and poked it into the corners with a cocktail stick and then let it level out and then hardened it with a UV pen. This produces an almost glass-like finish and it's really nice. I did a further pass over the armour with a wash of Pro Acryl Black Brown, diluted to produce a dirty look over the armour. This was then used on the boots, helmet, shoulders and the shotgun arm. I really liked what this wash of black brown added to the armour in terms of bringing out the depth and also adding grime and wear and tear to it, and it really made him look like he had been fighting for years through hell against all these demons. For the wooden parts of the shotgun, I used a Vallejo mahogany that produces a nice wooden texture when it's applied with a paintbrush. There are small decorative parts of the shotgun that are beautifully highlighted in gold. For this I used Decacolor Gold again, and it never disappoints. It goes on very nicely on one application. Most of the lights on board the Slayer's armour are actually LEDs inside the armour. For the very few that aren't, I used Pro Acryl Bold Pyrrole Red. I applied Vallejo steel to the leather strap buckles and also to small worn areas. Because of the proximity to the torso, I had hand painted the base layer of basic skin tone, but I wasn't happy with it, so I then decided to mask off the armour and then apply my usual skin tone procedure of an undercoat of purple and red. After the purple and red layers, I added a first basic skin tone layer to all the fleshy parts. I then used Vallejo Pro Pink, that's really hard to say, for a skin highlight to all the areas, and I followed that with a darkening of the shadowy areas with Orcish Dermis, and for a suntan look I applied a wash of Citadel's contrast paint Gullium Flesh. I finished the skin tones with the final addition of a small highlight with Pro Pink before applying a satin varnish to seal it all in and protect the paint. With the final pass of Tamiya Clear Red, I added a spritz of blood in the selected areas and I'm calling it done. And I'd just like to thank Funcrecol once again for supplying the resin products for this project. It really was a treat to use them. Again, I'm not getting paid to say this, but if you do decide to try any of them, there's a link below and I get a small commission from any subsequent sale. This doesn't cost you anything, but it all helps this small channel to run. Thank you so much. Once again, I'd just like to thank you all for the wonderful comments, and if you like what you see, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, and leave a comment in the comments section below and let me know what you think. Until next time, this has been R2-3D, and I'll see you in the next one.